Welcome to Design for Drupal, Boston 2020. This is our 12th anniversary, and for those of you who haven't been on one of our webinars, we're doing things a little different this year. We are hosting monthly webinars instead of an annual get-together. And believe it or not, this is November's webinar. I can't believe it's November already. And it's also Veterans Day, so happy Veterans Day to everybody. Today, we're going to be talking about Consentful UX. Johanna Bates and Clayton Dewey will be presenting shortly. I'm looking forward to that. Just a reminder, Christina Chumilis did our initial kickoff webinar, and we just wanted to thank her and encourage everybody to look into her project, which is the Claro admin theme. There's still a lot of good work going on there. There's the ability to continue contributing to her project. It's the admin UI channel in Slack, and also the G9 theme is for Oliviero, which is the experimental module for the front end. Next month, make sure to come back. Brian Perry will be presenting on web components, which we're really excited to hear about. And you can always sign up at designfordrupal.org. Coming up tomorrow is DrupalCamp NYC, so make sure to check that out. That's from the 12th to the 14th and is, of course, virtual. And then we have DrupalCon Europe coming up too on December 8th. And there's a lot of great sessions there too, so check that out. As always, there's a Boston Drupal meetup, which is the first Tuesday of every month at 7 o'clock. And please, we encourage everybody to join the Drupal Association. One of the benefits of that is that you can actually vote for board members if you get into there. And it's just a good way of staying on top of what's going on in the Drupal community. We have a code of conduct here at Design for Drupal. We just want to make sure everybody treats each other respectfully. You can go to our website. It's in the footer of our website, as well as at /code-conduct. And if anybody has any concerns, please address them to either Leslie Glynn or myself, Patrick Corbett, and you can reach us at 908-437-8725. I want to thank all of our sponsors. While we don't have a lot of costs associated with running a virtual event, there are some, and we really want to thank Redfin Solutions, Lullabot, McPhee Design, the American Graphics Institute, Dev Collaborative, Oomph, Isovera, Talking Drupal, 108 Degrees, and Oddbird. Thank you very much. If you want to tweet on social media or any other social media, just mention the hashtag D4D Boston. For today's webinar, we use the Q&A feature instead of the chat feature. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, just feel free to ask them in Q&A. It should be at the bottom of your screen. And put your questions in there, and Clayton and Johanna will address them at the end. We'll have time for Q&A. So without further ado, I want to welcome Johanna Bates and Clayton Dewey from Dev Collaborative, which, as I mentioned before, is one of the sponsors of the event. And we really are excited to hear about what they have to say about Consentful UX, something that I know I'm personally very curious to learn more about. Johanna, take it away.
Okay. Hello. I'm just going to share my screen. Yes. Yes. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Looks great.
Okay, great. Welcome to Consentful UX. I want to thank Patrick, Leslie, and the D4D team so much for giving us the opportunity to present today. I am Johanna Bates. I am co-founder and co-owner of Dev Collaborative. We build websites for nonprofits in Drupal and WordPress with a focus on accessibility and sustainability of content design and code. And I've been a front-end developer for 22 years with a particular interest in accessibility. And that interest in accessibility really kind of informed my pathway into this particular topic of consentful UX. I am somebody who has a lifelong diagnosis of an anxiety disorder, and I sometimes really struggle with feeling overwhelmed. And I am definitely somebody, I have limited time to focus on things and get work done, and I do the best I can. And when I encounter a lot of intrusive UX patterns or patterns that hide information that I need to know, things we're going to be looking at today, I am somebody who will get very frustrated and walk away, especially if it's excessive. And I will have a really terrible opinion of the company or organization who designed their site like that. So that's me. Clayton?
Hi, I'm Clayton Dewey, Clay Bolto on Twitter, CE Dewey on Drupal.org. The product owner at Dev Collaborative, focus primarily on information architecture and user experience. I've been doing that work professionally for about 11 years. Although I got my Drupalversary email, it was 15 years. But I created that account when I was more of a hobbyist. So yeah, and I, in my work, I've, focus on usability and empowerment in terms of how we design websites and apps. And as a parent, as a queer person, as a polyamorous person, consent is a big part of how I show up in the world and what I'm modeling for my kids, how I'm showing up in community with people. And so I'm particularly interested in how those lessons from the real world translate into the digital spaces. And, especially right now during the pandemic, concept of consent has been really important in how we keep each other safe and informed on what's happening. And now that we're also spending a lot more time in the digital world, it's even more important that we find ways to bring that concept of consent into those spaces. So that's what drew me to this topic and this theory of practice. And so, yeah, let's dive into it. So when we talk about user experience, oftentimes we can think of it as starting with a design persona. This is a method that was popularized by MailChimp. And so it's imagining your website or your app as a person. What would they be like? And so this is taken directly from MailChimp's persona. And, they have this quadrant here of the scale of friendly to unfriendly, dominant to submissive. And they're putting themselves smack dab in that quadrant of friendly and dominant. So expertise in a field, but very friendly about it, very empowering about it. Fun. And then using a this, not that syntax to describe that persona. So fun, but not childish. Funny, but not goofy. Powerful, but not alienating. And when we design our own websites and apps, we're most likely putting ourselves in that same quadrant, right? At least on the friendly side of things, and similar kind of descriptors. But unfortunately, the web oftentimes isn't very friendly, can be downright unfriendly. In just doing research for this topic, I found myself coming into these kind of issues. So I was curious about this concept of notifications as a dark pattern, searched for it on DuckDuckGo. First article that showed up looked really promising. So I went ahead and clicked on it, ready to read. And here I'm greeted. Welcome to the Design Lab blog. What kind of content are you interested in? Well, I'm interested in the article I was trying to read. So I'm going to close this. And this website uses cookies. Okay, fine. I don't really have a choice. So I'll click this got it button onto the article. questions about the UX Academy? We've got answers. No, I don't care about the UX Academy. I just want to read this article. Okay, here we go. Are notifications a dark pattern? Have you ever had a nightmare where you were literally drowning in little red notification badges? I haven't had that dream, but I understand the point that's being made. Okay, so I'm getting into the article. There's actually some really good stuff in here. I'm learning. And wait, what is this? Join 45,000. It's one of those newsletter signups. Okay, moving on. Notifications is a dark pattern. Trying to learn. Get your free ebook. No, I don't want an ebook. You know what? I'm done with this. I move my cursor to leave the site, and then it takes over the screen, and it's pushing that ebook again. So here I am trying to educate myself on notifications as dark patterns, and I'm being bombarded with dark patterns. It really reminds me of that scene from the movie Airplane, where the pilot is trying to get to his flight. This site uses cookies. Okay, onward. We've updated our privacy policy. All right. Hey, we've noticed you're using cookies. Update your settings. This site wants to turn on notifications. We've noticed you're using an ad blocker. An autoplay video pops up. Get out of here, sponsored content. This site wants to know your location. Get a clickbait, Amazon ad, another subscribe to your newsletter modal. It's exhausting. So if we return back to that design persona, are we really in that dominant and friendly quadrant? Definitely dominant, but I'd put us over in the unfriendly quadrant. And are we really being fun but not childish, or powerful but not complicated? I'd say that we're more along the lines of pushy but not threatening. And entitled, but not full-on aggro creeper. Needy but not desperate. Well, actually, when I tried to leave that site and they gave that full page screen pushing the ebook, I feel like that was pretty desperate. So we claim to be friendly, but unfortunately, a lot of the experiences we design are actually pretty hostile.
So for the sake of exploring consentful UX, we want to just use a frame of coercive UX to create for the sake of contrast, to talk about some of these very boring everyday patterns that we're all very used to. Dense terms of service, cookie modals, pop-ups, etc. They seem really normal to us. But when you look more closely, they're actually manipulative. They manipulate users to try to get them to do something that we want them to do. And I'd like to actually spend a few minutes just zeroing in on the one that we're all besieged with so often, that we've been talking about here a little more than some of the others. Pop-ups, modals, notifications, interstitials. They're more than just annoying. And I kind of knew this just from being a user on the internet. But I wanted to dig deeper and understand why they are so ubiquitous right now and how they degrade user experience. But before I go there, I do want to say that there are some very good reasons to use these kinds of patterns. The alert dialogue is a very old concept in software design. And obviously, they're a pattern that interrupts the user's flow. It forces them to stop whatever they're doing and read a message and acknowledge it before they can continue, particularly if it's a modal that really makes the background page inactive. When we're doing this to help users by grabbing their attention, that's a great use for them. But when we interrupt the user, sometimes repeatedly, to try and get them to take an action they didn't come to a site to do, then that's not helpful at all. That's coercive. And as we showed earlier, even researching this topic, we encountered plenty of coercive UX. And I wanted to read about whether these patterns work for marketing. So here's an article that I found about how to use pop-ups to increase conversions. And this particular part of the article that I'm showing is specifically about how to avoid Google SEO penalties for using these patterns. And I'm going to talk more about that later. But after about 30 seconds, when I was attempting to focus on this article, this pop-up opened and covered my content. And for those who may not be able to see it, there's a pop-up covering an article, and it says, "Can I send you my next post?" and advertises some sort of email newsletter. So I've got two options here before I can kind of go on with trying to focus on this content. I can give them my email address so they can, as the button says, send me everything. Who doesn't want that in their email inbox? Or I can close it using a really hard to see low contrast X in the upper corner. I have a limited amount of time to read and to focus. Getting derailed from my tasks leaves me feeling anxious and stressed. If it's too excessive, I won't ever go back to this site again. But clearly, some people are signing up for this Send Me Everything newsletter, given this chance, or else why else would this pattern be here? Why would these be so widely used? And what does research show about this? Well, our nice go-to gold standard Nielsen-Norman group research shows that I'm not alone. Many users hate these patterns. And they are among the most hated patterns on the internet. But we use them because marketing says they work. They increase conversions. But do they? So I found many articles about how these intrusive patterns do sometimes appear to work. And, before I go bashing on them, I actually don't want to do that because there's nothing wrong with these metrics. And another name for them is vanity metrics. So a bump in your email list size, number of petition signatures, open rates, website traffic. These are common things that get boosted by these kinds of UX patterns. But they're a little bit more like a robo spam call, like a wide end of a funnel. They're trying to capture as many users as possible in the hopes of some meaningful conversions. And again, they are not bad inherently, but you do sort of need to ask other questions along with this if you really want to understand how your UX, whether your UX is effective and how it's affecting users. Because I often feel like this person biting this pencil when I am surfing the internet. So, how many users did you annoy and lose? And how does that counterbalance the bump in email list signups you may have gotten? How many people entered fake email addresses? And if you can look longer term, how many people who used that pattern to add themselves to your email list actually ever donated to your organization or bought something that you were selling or remain engaged with your company, product, service, or organization? So I'm going to go into this a little bit later and circle back to it. But all this to say, hijacking visual or mental focus, as with a modal, obviously forces someone's attention away from their intended focus. And at best, it distracts people. And that may degrade their ability to engage fully with your content, service, or other offering. It wears users down, so they may just share their information just to stop being harassed. And this is a form of coercion. Another thing that's powerful that designers have used a lot that I'm sure you're noticing is motion and the color red. Biologically, people who can see motion and the color red are wired to respond to it. That's why red is a very common color for those badges and notifications. And that's why those chatbots move in the corner to try and get your attention. But when we're doing this, we are actually exploiting a biological process of attention, visual and mental focus in order to redirect users. And attention is a limited resource. So I was researching for this presentation, and I was reading about cognitive overload during the pandemic. And I was about a minute, not on load, but a minute into reading this article. So I'm like focused on it, taking it in, and I get this pop-up. And it just took me right out of my focus. And just like computers, human brains have a limited amount of processing power. When the amount of information coming in exceeds our ability to handle it, our performance suffers. We may take longer to understand information, miss important details, or get overwhelmed and abandon the task. And we don't know what our users are experiencing before they even get to our gauntlet of intrusive UX. They might be, checking, they might be reading articles at a bus stop in the rain or in bright sun where contrast is an issue. Maybe they're waiting in a doctor's appointment waiting room and they're stressed out and trying to distract themselves. Maybe they're working while watching a baby, which I can say is not easy to do, and many people are doing right this minute. And these intrusive UX patterns erode their ability to focus on what they need to focus on and can easily cause cognitive overload. And they just may give up and leave your site. Cognitive overload particularly affects users with mental health challenges, attention deficit, and other cognitive issues. People who don't speak the language that your website is written in as their first language, people who are less comfortable with technology, and people experiencing anxiety and stress, which I don't know about you, for me is literally everybody I know right now. So in short, we're not respecting users. Sometimes an excessive number, I will argue that an excessive number of these intrusive UX patterns says we don't trust our users to engage with us if they like us. It really kind of feels like an unhealthy relationship. So to reiterate, coercive UX patterns manipulate users to try to get them to do something that we want them to do. And it's important to ask, would you do this with someone in person? So Nielsen Norman Group has conducted decades of user research, and they know that people dislike pop-ups and modals. And one time they were running a usability study, and they observed a user attempting to complete a task. The participant got so frustrated after encountering multiple pop-ups consecutively that he threw his phone across the table. Frustrated, he abandoned his task and left the website with a very bad impression of the organization.
Whoa, did you say bad impression? That sounds like that's bad for business. But you know what's great for business, Johanna? My new newsletter, Clayton's Hot Biz Tips newsletter. You gonna sign up and be a billionaire like me, or are you just a loser?
I'm definitely a loser. Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to keep asking you to join my newsletter every time I see you.
So I think you get the point. We can do better than this. And now Clayton's going to take over and talk a little bit more about a framework we can use to make more respectful, more consentful UX.
That's right. I feel bad for doing that, even though it was a joke. So what is consentful UX? And of course, someone just knocked on my door. Okay. Presenting from home. So consentful UX comes from the concept of consentful tech. And sorry, one second. I'm going to relocate. Stand by 1 minute. Of course.
So this furthers the point that you never know what someone's going to be dealing with when they come to your website. They might have teens trying to get into their house.
There might be contractors saying that they came to work on your house, even though they didn't schedule that at this time. But all right, I'm back though. So consentful technologies are digital applications and spaces that are built with consent at their core, and that support the self-determination of people who use and are affected by these technologies. This came out from an excellent initiative called the Consentful Tech Project. You can learn more at consentfultech.io. And so what do we mean by consent then, if consent is at the core? Well, they built their definition of consent off of the one put forth by Planned Parenthood, which uses a framework called FRIES. Freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific. And they mapped each of these principles to the digital realm. So let's take a look at these. First is freely given. If an interface is designed to mislead people into doing something they normally wouldn't do, the application is not consentful. So, for example, pop-ups, modals, interstitial videos, many of the things we've already highlighted so far. Manipulinks, like sign up for my newsletter. If you don't, then you don't like information, you don't like improving yourself. Some sort of coercive copy, auto-playing video or audio. So let's take a look at a few of these examples in the wild. Yes, the news sites, these are notorious. So I get to this article, let's say it's an important one, updating me on what is happening with COVID-19 in my community. Instead of getting the content I'm looking for, I get a sign-up newsletter before I've even engaged with the site, and it's asking me to allow for notifications. Instead of doing this, we can do something that Bitch Media is doing, which is they have a newsletter. They want to inform their users about it, but they're putting it in the natural flow of content. So this is an article that's a series of book reviews. And so I'm reading this book review about the book Making Friends with Alice Dyson. I finish reading the review, and then I see this call out for their newsletter, which, the newsletter is important. We want people to know about it. I was able to be informed about that without my concentration being broken. Another example of a coercive pattern. I'm at this article. There's a video at the top. I don't care about the video, so I scroll down to read the article, but the video follows me on the right-hand side. And to make matters worse, off to the left-hand side are some social share buttons that are following me down the page, and then off to the right is an Amazon ad. So everywhere around the article are distractions to my attention and trying to actually read something that is actually pretty important to me. Another example, from Etsy, we've got some coercive copy here, almost gone. There's only 3 left. And then from Airbnb, 78% of places in New York for your dates and guests are already booked. You may want to book soon. Right, so if this was happening in real life, this would be that pushy salesperson that we hate so much. So in summary, when we have calls to action, put them in the flow of content. You can put them in the header and the footer. Those are persistent elements that people can always easily get to. Or have your call to action appear at the end of an article. If you're going to use animation or video or audio, make sure that there's a play button there that the user is initiating so that they're controlling that on their own terms. Okay, on to the next principle, reversible. In technology, you should have the right to limit access or entirely remove your data at any time. So some coercive patterns around this. No mention of how to delete your data, an onerous process for deleting your data, those unsubscribe links in that teeny tiny font with the low contrast. So let's look at one example of how difficult it can be to delete your data.
How to cancel your Amazon Prime subscription. Step 1. Go to the Prime Central or Manage Prime membership page. Do not click on memberships and subscriptions.
Don't do that.
Do not click on your account. Just click on your Prime membership. Step 2. Look at below, and then scroll on down and click End Membership and Benefits.
The least
Step
obvious.
3. Keep saying you want to cancel through the 3-step process. First, click on End My Benefits, and then click on Continue to Cancel. Click to End button to cancel your Prime membership. Your membership has been canceled and you will see the cancellation confirmed message on screen. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe to us.
Thank you, Friendly Robot, for explaining that. I will subscribe to us very soon. In that last screenshot, you can see there's 3 equally weighted buttons trying to get us to not cancel our subscription. So just confirm 3 times that you want to cancel. Another example. Okay, here's a fun one. The unsubscribe link. And and it's funny because myself and I'll bet a lot of people on this call, we're so conditioned now, we can hunt and find that unsubscribe link pretty quickly. But this one actually caught me off guard. It took me a moment because they intentionally, at least I think so, intentionally don't use unsubscribe. And instead it's to update your email address, change your name or address, or to stop receiving emails from corporate accountability. Please click here. And gotta love that click here link too. So, and once you find that click here link, this is what you're taken to. And so this kind of goes back again. I feel like it's another like desperate last ditch attempt, putting the yes, unsubscribe me button in red rather than green. Is it really worth doing that? Please just don't do that. To summarize, to make things reversible easily, mention how to delete your data and make it easy to do so, and make it easy to unsubscribe. If someone wants to unsubscribe to your newsletter, they're going to do it. Just let them do it. So on to the third principle of FRIES. Informed. Consentful applications use clear and accessible language to inform people about the risks they present and the data they are storing, rather than burying these important details in, for example, the fine print of terms and conditions. So some coercive patterns we see here, as kind of mentioned in the description: dense, unreadable privacy policies in terms of service, clauses within that privacy policy in the fine print says we can change this at any time and not notify you. Or if you have a multilingual audience, not translating those important documents. So here's an example that I really love and is doing this well. So it's Firefox's privacy policy page, and they write in really plain language what data you are sharing with them and why. And then if you want to drill down and get the real nitty gritty on that, then you can click that plus button, open it up and read it. And what I really love is they have a link there to then change your settings right there on the spot if you want to control the data you're sharing even more so. So to summarize, to be informed. Oh, I'll wait for that slide.
Sorry about that.
It's just so good, we're going to watch it again. So instead of having a dense privacy policy, you can break that up into easy to understand language. using those headings is really great so that you are covering all of the fine print that needs to be there, but you're doing it in a human-friendly way. Notify your users when your privacy policy changes. There's GDPR, and there are laws in California and others rolling out now that even have legal implications for these things. And make sure that you have it in all of the languages that your users speak and read. All right, so that brings us to our fourth principle of FRIES, which is enthusiastic. If people are giving up their data because they have to in order to access necessary services and not because they want to, that is not consentful, right? We want to be saying yes to something because we truly want to be saying yes to it, not to be pressured into this. So examples of this: cookie walls or performative cookie consent banners, or only an accept button. Or aggressive notifications that just keep asking you over and over again if you want to do something. So let's look at some examples of these. I've seen some bad cookie walls in my day, but this one might be the worst. We need your consent. It just flies in the face of the whole notion of consent, right? That's something that you ask for and it has to be freely given. And then there you go. You have no choice but to accept it. So very performative. And then here's an example. Oh my goodness. How many times have you all gotten this from Instagram? Turn on notifications. Not now. Day 2 later. You want to turn on notifications?
Every time.
Yeah. Apple does this a lot. Oh gosh, YouTube is always pressuring me to start a paid version. If I've said no, I've said no. If I want to change my mind, I'll go to my settings and I'll change that. A much more consentful pattern is from the Allied Media Project, which kind of helped spawn this consentful tech project to begin with. So this is a gold standard. This is kind of a big brain, galaxy brain moment, right? You go to their site, they're not tracking you at all with analytics tracking. Instead, you see this private browsing icon. If you click into that icon in the lower corner, you get this lovely message. We're not watching you. At AMP, we believe that any browsing information you share should be freely and enthusiastically given. Unlike most sites, our browsing is set to private by default. And then you can click to enable that tracking if you'd like, and then you're sharing some helpful data to them so that they can improve the service. And they even have a link out here to that Firefox privacy policy, which I found that after the fact is just an excellent moment of serendipity there, and kind of lovely to see that cross-pollination happening. So to recap, to be enthusiastic, make sure that your site can function with people declining those analytics cookies. That is a ruling from GDPR, is that you can only require cookies if they are inherent to the functioning of the site. So for example, if you have an app where you just absolutely have to have someone's location for it to even work, then that's okay. But otherwise, if it's not essential, you can't force people into doing that. And then notifications, right? Respect users' wishes when it comes to notifications. Don't harp on them over and over. All right, so on to the fifth principle of FRIES, specific. A consentful app only uses data the person has directly given, not data acquired through other means like scraping or buying, and uses it only in ways someone has consented to. So in our practice of web design, some examples of this would be, coercive would be you don't even have the cookie notification, even if you're using cookies on your site, or that generic cookie notification that is just all or nothing, or making gender or other personal information required fields when it's not necessary to do that. So another example of how you can do this in a more consentful way is this site here, which says, here again, you have the option of accepting those analytics cookies or rejecting them. And then if you click through to the read more about our cookies link, you're given this really helpful list, again, of the different types of cookies. And again, in that plain language, what those cookies are doing. And then you can opt in and out. And we don't have a screenshot of this, but if you click that link of like list of cookies that remember pop-ups, then it'll actually bring up the very specific cookies there. So for like the hardcore privacy policy folks amongst us. So in summary, when being specific, have specific cookie opt-in settings, and when you're designing forms, only include necessary fields, and only designate fields that are required if they're truly required for the functioning of your service. So there you have it. As far as putting this into practice, I think returning to that design persona is really great, right? If we're truly holding ourselves to that design persona, that friendly persona, then we wouldn't be engaging in these coercive practices. Co-designing is another thing. The closer we are to our users, the better our chances are of designing something that truly works for them. And so, similarly, you can run readability tests and you can run usability tests with your users. If you have an important fundraiser coming up and you want people to know about it, but you want to strike the right balance between informing them of it, but not going so far as to breaking their concentration around what they came to the site originally for, design something and then test it out with your users and see how it lands. And with that, I'll turn it over to Johanna to talk about working with stakeholders.
So I am super psyched to see that someone named Jay asked a question in the Q&A, which we'll get to very shortly. How do you work with clients who are insistent on coercive design elements? And that's what I'm attempting to address in this portion of our presentation, because working with stakeholders is something we all have to do, and it's really challenging. There are, as designers and developers and people who help shape, web applications and websites, sometimes we want to do something in a better way or a different way. And it's really hard when giants like Facebook and, the big media outlets, big box stores, the big websites out there are using these patterns. Stakeholders feel like, well, they must have done all sorts of research and they know that they're effective. Then, they might try them out and get some bumps in their list size. And then, it's all can be downhill from there sometimes. There are a few things I can suggest for using when you're talking with stakeholders about this kind of thing. And the first thing is really the same argument I go to when I'm trying to talk stakeholders in a project into prioritizing accessibility. And SEO, really, really good accessibility built into a website can absolutely optimize SEO. That's just true. And so a fun fact to share with your stakeholders is that in 2017, Google very kind of quietly announced that they were going to start penalizing responsive sites that had any pop-ups, modals, or interstitials on mobile widths on their sites. And the next slide, these slides are going to be available. D4D is kindly going to put them up. And there's a link on our next slide, which is a resources slide, to the documentation from Google about this. So if you want to go read that, it's there. So SEO is a good argument to try. The next one is trust and respect is good business. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the design persona. If your company or organization has spent time thinking about your brand persona and design personas, and you've talked about your values as an organization and trying to express those values in your your products, your services, your programs, your content, is it also being expressed in your design, in your UX itself? And that can be a really good opportunity to do that exercise where you pretend that your UX is a person, and you maybe role play where someone someone is a member of your audience and they're having a conversation with your website. Does it feel like when Clayton blew an air horn and interrupted my slide earlier? That's, if that doesn't tie back to the values that you espouse as an organization, that's a good point to raise with stakeholders. And finally, going back to vanity metrics. So this one is it's not a quick and easy one. Vanity metrics could be a whole webinar unto itself. And in the next resource slide, I link to a pretty long PDF made by an organization called Mobilization Lab. And it has like steps that organizations and companies can take to start developing sort of deeper questions about how to measure success. And so I encourage you to check that out if this topic interests you. But the way they define vanity metrics are data that are easily manipulated and are biased towards short-term and often paint a rosy picture of program or product success, but don't help decision makers make wise strategic decisions long-term necessarily. So this is going to be a process where you're going to sit down and maybe have a conversation internally about, are there better ways to measure how engaged our users are? Are there additional questions that we're not asking? Where we may be losing audience members because of something we're doing that seems to be getting like quick hit results. And you'll probably develop a bunch of questions, try them out, and need to iterate them on them into the future. So, it's a little bit more of an involved conversation, but I think it's really worth considering. So this is our resources slide. And again, this will be available afterwards. And that pretty much brings us to the end. And I know that we have some questions. Yeah, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks, Johanna and Clayton. That was awesome. I think we do have some questions, and we'll get to those in just a second. I just wanted to, thank you for a great session. And the one thing that stuck with me was, would you do this and would you treat like a client like this in person? And I would hope the answer is no. Right. But it's easy, the disconnect is easy there, where you just want to increase traffic and, you don't have to actually interact with them. So what's the big deal? But it's a good reminder for all of us to be more conscious about that and treat people maybe a little better. I had one question before we get to other people's, which is, when I work with clients, I find that they are very concerned about, let's say, their traffic going down, if we change something. How can we educate them, or what metrics can we follow to convince them otherwise?
Clayton, do you want to take that one?
I can share some thoughts, and if you want to add on.
Sure.
Yeah, I think you spoke pretty well to it with the vanity metrics slide. And some of these things can actually affect site traffic in a negative way, right? Like Johanna was sharing anecdotally, and I'm the same way. If there's too many modals there that come up initially, I will leave the site. And so it can affect bounce rate. I think it can be hard, though, to really closely find the kind of quantitative data around that. So I think it might be more persuasive. I think it's more persuasive oftentimes to show that in a usability test, right? And have people kind of share just how negative a response they're getting from it, and seeing if showing that to stakeholders can really kind of drive the point home. to them of like, is this really actually even working the way we want it to?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think Chris is going to field some questions from the audience.
Yeah, I'll take it through from the Q&A, and everyone, please feel free to continue to add questions if you have them. So the first here is from Stephanie, and you talked a little bit about running readability tests and, running user focus groups and testing. So can you talk more about how would you form a focus group around these kinds of things, and what kind of factors would you consider for building a group for real user testing?
Yeah, I guess I'll take this one since it was on one of the slides I presented. Yeah, I love this question. It's one that's actually on my mind a lot these days. So ideally, in a real, in an ideal world, it's really helpful to seek out the users that Johanna was talking about in the one slide about reduced attention and capacity. So if you you have a subset of users who say, for example, your site is in English and you have users that where English is not their first language, testing things. We did that recently with a legal aid site and got lots of insight in how to make our sites both better for multilingual users and, the site better in Spanish and also using better plain language English. So thinking about essentially who is going to be most, who is coming in with the most challenges to your site and focusing on them will then make the site better for everyone, right? And this is something we hear a lot with intersectional politics of focusing on those who are experiencing the most marginalization or oppression. If you can address those issues and work from that point, then you're really benefiting everyone and getting to the core challenges that you're designing for.
Yeah. Same with universal design. That's the same. If it's more accessible for someone with a particular challenge, in theory, it could be better for many more people that you're not thinking of.
Great, thanks. Ruth asks, let's say product scarcity is real in your examples of Etsy or, I think I was on an Indiegogo this morning or Airbnb. Using your framework, what would be a good way to sort of positively convey that there is a legitimate scarcity here in a way that's respectful to users?
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? I think that it's not necessarily bad to let people know that there's a limited number of things. Like I sometimes buy art and it'll say there's only 5 prints left of 10 that were made, and that's fine. I think the patterns that are most coercive are the ones that we see, like when we use Airbnb and they're like, you're literally surfing, like you're looking at potential places. It's like, 7% of places have been booked for your time period. Hurry, So basically trying to trigger people's anxiety. So again, thinking about how you would let somebody know if they were in person, if you were having a conversation with them, that this is a limited number of things available. Might you just say, there are only, 10 of these total, without exclamation points and little icons with, like a Grim Reaper or an hourglass. Some of these things are nuanced and subtle and going to be really specific to the kind of product that you're dealing with. But I think that going right for someone's anxiety disorder is just pretty tacky. As someone with anxiety disorder, I can say that I find it tacky at best. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts, Clayton?
No, I think you nailed it. Yep. I would have said the same thing.
Yeah.
basically. Yeah.
Agree. Good. And Marianne asks a couple of questions, but I'll combine them for you here. A lot of them are around sort of legalese, and GDPR and CCPA have changed rules. Even can spam from long ago has required unsubscribes and required that those be easy to use and do. And we've seen a lot of examples that are probably non-compliant. Even click here is dodgy legally, not just ethically. And the same for terms of service and privacy policies, and running up against lawyers who are saying, no, I'm not comfortable providing plain text or simplified versions of these. So some of these external legal factors can get in your way. So, any advice on how we might convince some of those external parties that this is important?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the limitation of GDPR and CCPA, right? It's like my understanding, what I've been following in the news, is the reality around enforcement is that they're starting with the larger sites first, and so there's a whole slew of small and mid-sized businesses, universities, nonprofits, right, websites out in the wild that are not complying and can really, like, on a legal level, probably going to be okay. You're not going to have someone knocking on your door giving you some citation for it. So it's really on us as practitioners to advocate for that, knowing that they're not going to face legal repercussions. Like, we see these cookie consent walls everywhere that really are not GDPR compliant, and they're not going to enforce it they're not going to be able to enforce it on such a wide level. So it's really, really up to us. And then as far as the privacy policy stuff goes too, I wonder if there's, maybe we should find some like lawyers, from Mozilla and other places, because you can make something legally binding and still readable, like adding those headings, for example, in plain language. That is not violating any kind of the legal upstanding of that document. So if lawyers are using that as an excuse, we can politely and professionally correct them on that and insist on making things readable.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to, like, from experience, we've worked with 2 legal aid organizations who the premise of their projects was that they had like all of this legalese for their clients on their websites that were unparsable, and they wanted to chuck it all and rewrite it and make it readable using plain language and headers and clear. And those were 2 really satisfying projects for us. So lawyers sometimes are willing to rewrite things or clarify them. I think a great example to send people is that slide of the National Health Service in the UK. I don't have my slides well labeled enough that I can find it real quickly, but basically, let me see if I can find it. It basically was, no, that's too far back. It's basically really well, here it is. It's really well, I mean, this is the NHS for the UK. Right. And they were able to, and yes, okay, they have resources, but it is possible to provide some translation, even if you also provide the whole thing. In the end, nobody is reading those huge privacy policies. So if you can convey the meaning, like, that's just lawyers being, I'm probably going to insult some lawyers. Sorry, lawyers being lazy. There's some fantastic lawyers out there who really want people to understand what they're trying to say and what things mean. And find you some of them lawyers if you need help.
Yes.
Good. I love that. I don't see any more open questions in the Q&A. I've thrown some answers up for if anyone wants to read what I kind of summed up there. But otherwise, I will say thank you again for your presentation. And you can imagine that there's probably a lot of people clapping behind their screens.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Remember, we won't push it on you, but if you visit the website, please register for next month's webinar, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Johanna. Thanks, Clayton.
Take care. Thank you.
Take care.
Much. Really
Bye.
appreciate it. Bye, everyone.